Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile 2 discussion. That is right, while Path of Exile 1 is about to have the return of the Ancestors event, which is going to be starting tomorrow my time, and it's actually only 18 hours away as I'm recording this video, Path of Exile 2 is going to be getting a new patch to the Return of the Ancients expansion, and this one is quite a doozy. What I want to do here is go through the video that has been put out by Grand Games and by Jonathan, and break down some of the things that I think are more important than they appear on the surface. So without further ado, let's jump to the start of this. This patch is not live yet, but it could be live anytime this week, or maybe they'll decide to have it come out next week. So as this weekend, the focus is on the Path of Exile 1 event instead. That is something we'll have to find out.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2. Last week we made some improvements to Expedition and the Runes of Aldur.
Now, Grand Games recorded this video without using a loot filter. What that means is that you may not have noticed that exceptional Cassis helm that is sitting there. That was one of the changes they explicitly made in patch 0.5.3. There are some very, very rare armor and weapon chests. They are golden, and they'll contain one of these exceptional items. So these are the ones that either have their quality boosted beyond 20, or they have an additional socket over the normal maximum that's available for an uncorrupted item. Now, one thing that's important to note, this is going to come up a bit when we start talking about some of the ways that you can juice monsters here. Whenever you have a tier 5 rare item drop, if you've allocated certain passives on your Atlas passive tree, there is a chance that they will become upgraded into a normal rarity exceptional item. Keep that one in mind when we start talking about ways to boost monster rarity, which will come up a lot when we start talking about the expedition changes that are made. On top of this, you'll also see the next chest that Jonathan opens is going to contain a Divine Orb, and you're not going to notice that because there is no loot filter present. Please get yourself a loot filter. If you don't have one, just use one of the default ones from Neversink's website, filterblade.xyz. It will be an absolute godsend for making certain that you don't miss extremely important drops because they just look the same as all of the other rubbish that's on the ground. Also, it'll make all of the ground clutter disappear as well.
But we still wanted these mechanics to have more depth in the endgame, while giving you more control over how you engage with them. So in 054, we're introducing an Atlas passive tree for Runes of Aldur.
Now, this is something that I think will be a surprise to people to see such a substantial thing being added in the middle of a league. This is going to mean that all farming that takes place after this patch goes live is going to be substantially better than all farming that took place before it. Just as actually was the case for the Abyss mechanic in 0.5.3, when all of the farming that had happened previously ended up kind of getting devalued a little bit because they made it much easier to get your hands on some of the ancient Abyss bones. Those became much more common there, and as a result, they're worth less than they used to be, they're more accessible for crafting than they used to be, but also they're much easier to find yourself than they used to be. I think we're going to see something somewhat similar here, where a whole number of things are going to be less valuable than they were in the past because they're more accessible.
This tree lets you invest into Remnant encounters, Expeditions, and Grand Expeditions, allowing you to tailor the experience to your playstyle.
Now, when they're talking about tailoring the experience to your playstyle, you can get all 24 points. So in most cases, you're not really going to be doing much tailoring. You're just going to be juicing here. There are a couple of things, though, where you can make different choices, and some of those will get mentioned here. Most of those is a choice between either I want to leave things mostly as they are, and I want to make things substantially harder and get more rewards for it. But there's exceptions, including the first one of those that we're going to talk about.
What's actually on this tree? There are 24 points in total, including 12 notables, and some of them introduce entirely new mechanics. This multi-choice node lets you choose between finding additional remnants or increasing your chances of encountering expeditions in your maps.
So let's talk about the wording here, shall we? 10% chance for an additional Verisium Remnant. This is plus 0.1 Verisium Remnants per map. At the same time, 25% increased chance of expedition encounters. This is actually a multiplier. So you add up all of the increased chance that you've got. If the baseline chance is 10%, I'm not exactly sure what the precise amount is there, but it's something of that sort of order. If the baseline chance is 10%, then getting 25% increased doesn't take you up to 35%. It takes you up to 1.25 times 10%, which is 12.5%. So that is the reason that you have the more high impact option here actually has a higher percentage increase number on it. That's because these percentages mean entirely different things. I want you to keep that in mind when you're making a decision about this. I feel like both choices here are potentially pretty good, and you can swap between them at any time. So if you do feel you made the wrong choice at one point, well, you can always just swap it over.
By taking this node, Pharaoh will begin selling a new currency item that can be purchased with Verisium, which by this point, you probably got plenty of. If you don't like the rewards on your runic inscriptions, you can use this currency to re-roll the runes and begin the encounter for a mystery reward.
Now, one thing you might notice there is that it went from a 4-rune encounter to a 5-rune encounter, and we don't know whether this is just going to end up being a random encounter or whether it's going to be something that's randomized in a different way. So it may be that it's randomized in the player's favor. It may be that it's randomized against the player. We'll have to find that one out with a bit of experimentation. That said, unless it's randomized a fair bit in your favor, I don't think this is going to be an extraordinarily good thing. It might just be a little bit of fun to mess around with for a little while. But most of the time, I think if a Remnant doesn't have anything really good on it, the best bet is probably going to be to walk past it. However, emphasis on that being the case most of the time, you will see a playstyle that's getting a bit of support on this tree where you want to stack up all of these Verisium encounters, even the weak ones. And that's because you want to then propagate their mods further down the explosion chain and potentially gigajuice or even overjuice monsters. Not so much because that will make the later remnants in the chain better, but because it will make the monster loot better. And this is where some of those things we were talking about before with rarity, this is where that starts coming in, because you're going to be able to potentially upgrade a tier 5 rare into a normal rarity exceptional item sometimes. And whilst not every exceptional item is valuable, enough of them are that this is definitely worth your while looking into.
The customized traditional expedition encounters. Starting with a simple example, you can choose between gaining an additional explosive or an additional remnant.
Here I think this is one of those choices where it's not going to matter very much. I think both choices are going to be of comparable value. Both will be a meaningful value. The reason I would lean towards going with an additional remnant here is it gives you more chances to get very lucky. If you do have one exceptionally good remnant, you're just going to take it, you're going to path directly to it, and you're going to ignore everything else. The other thing is that adding an extra explosive is going to make the encounter take longer to complete, and that is generally a negative thing because you could be starting another one.
You can invest into finding more logbooks, or take this entirely new mechanic, Verisium Sentries. These sentries can appear during expedition encounters, and if you decide to unearth them, they'll infuse nearby enemies with runic power. Something
you'll notice here is the name Sentry and Sentinel. Even though they're not exactly the same word, they are being used interchangeably, and that I think is because this is a spiritual successor to Path of Exile 1's Sentinel mechanic. It is not an exact copy of the Sentinels, but it feels like it's got something that is at least from the DNA of that mechanic. The idea here is that there is a localized, very, very dangerous pack of monsters that have more item rarity and more item quantity than you would normally expect to find. Now, I think in many cases, you're probably going to want to have these be fairly late in your chain, but maybe not the very last explosive. And that's going to be because of some of the other options you'll have where you can propagate modifiers along the chains and end up having more and more and more juice on the base game drops that come from these monsters.
Additional runes and increasing their rewards. Good luck finding one with an opulent rune. You can also specialize further into Grand Expeditions, like this notable, which allows Grand Expeditions to roll a third modifier.
And Jonathan's all excited about the third modifier. I'm also kind of excited that they have +1 area level as well. There's a lot in this particular modifier. I think this is a very, very strong notable and one that players are going to definitely want to take, especially given that there is also another notable somewhere else on the tree that I've seen Jonathan quickly mouse over that grants more logbook drops. So you're going to be able to spend more of your time in logbooks, and also the time that you do spend there potentially be more rewarding than it was.
You can speed up encounters by reducing the number of monsters required before the explosive line proceeds.
And this is probably one of the best of them all, not having to spend quite as long in each encounter, not having to go looking around for the 2 or 3 monsters you missed. This is going to be a huge improvement.
Or make unearthed enemies spawn with 25% of their life already missing. Explosions hurt.
That one's not nothing, but I would suggest taking that quite late. It's pretty low impact. There is occasionally going to be a monster that is the difference between that monster taking ages because it's just really, really tanky and it's really well set up against your character's offensive power. But one of the real problems is that one of the things that makes monsters super tanky is that sometimes they have regeneration, and if they've got regeneration, they're probably going to end up getting most of that life back by the time you get to that monster. So I think you'll find that this is going to be a boost against the weaker monsters that is less impactful against the more powerful ones.
And finally, you can decide how dangerous your Remnant chains become. You can prevent runic modifiers from propagating down the chain entirely, or, if you're looking for a bigger challenge and bigger rewards, give Remnants a chance to pass on 2 runic modifiers instead of 1.
So yeah, this is the one where you can end up having really, really, really juice drops potentially from the regular monsters. And the playstyle this is empowering, leaving aside whether this is good or not, that's going to take testing to find out. The playstyle it's empowering is one where you kind of go to all of the remnants that you can, and you then propagate mods down with the longest remnant chain being as close to the end as you can make it without kind of wrecking your entire chain. And the intention there is that you end up having something like 12 or 13 of these rune mods all applying to the monster that you're fighting, and maybe even more than that. And it ends up being something that's very, very hard, but that also provides a lot of just core base game drops. Whether those base game drops are ones you want or not is going to come down to RNG, but you're rigging the odds somewhat in your favor by doing this.
So that's the new tree. Overall, there are now many more ways to customize both the challenge and rewards of this league. But that's not all. We have another super important feature involving unique items. Since 0.1, one of the most requested features has been the ability to use more of the uniques you find in the endgame on your next characters, and we agree. Starting in 0.54, unique items will automatically scale their skill level down to match lower level characters.
This particular Sylvan's Effigy, this item itself, not necessarily the item in general, this item in the past would have had a minimum level of 84 to equip. The reason for that is that the skill it grants is level 19, and grinding games don't let you equip level 19 gems until you are character level 84. However, under this new system, you'll be able to equip this at level 62 because that is now the printed minimum level on the item. And at that point, it will be treated as a level 14 version of the gems that you get with it. That will then level up as your character does. And so you'll then be able to use it at level 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 without needing to do any sort of messing around. But once you get it to 19, if you want to then take it up to 20, that's going to take one of the perfect flux items that was added in 0.50. Those things are expensive. Those things are chase drops. So you probably don't want to use it unless it is your absolute best in slot item for your build. So give some serious thought as to whether that's worth your while or not. But for any unique item that is just common or uncommon, you'll easily be able to get the level 19 versions of them. And then a level 21 is a much bigger investment should you want it. Jonathan is about to call out the biggest single beneficiary of this. One trade niche that I had thought of and then never actually got around to doing was using Orbs of Chance on low-level wands in order to create a Lifesprig. And then once you have one, using the 3-for-1, I'm going to call it a vendor recipe because that's my Path of Exile 1 brain, but the 3-for-1 Reforge to basically re-roll the mods on it. So you would buy 2 high-level Lifesprigs that other players have looted, and that will give you a low-level Lifesprig again, but one with different explicit modifiers on it. This would be a way to get yourself a +3 Lifesprig that you could use early in the game. Nowadays, that's no longer needed. If you want to get a Lifesprig that's +3, well, 1 in 3 of them that drop at endgame will be. And maybe you'll even apply a Varlob to it and boost it to level 4, and then your low-level character can start the game with a +4 Lifesprig and not have to change their equipment until they're really starting to get to yellow maps.
There are so many uniques with interesting skills that only drop from high levels, and it was a real shame you couldn't use them until the late endgame. Now if you get a unique from a pinnacle boss, you can use that unique with its unique skill as soon as you meet that item's minimum level requirement. This should open up a whole bunch of builds available to play much earlier. It also helps when leveling new characters. If you found a high level Lifesprig, feel free to equip it right from level 2. Speaking of uniques, last week we teased some new Vessel of Coolamark items. The first of those is now ready, the Master's Reach. This unique grants its own skill, Untether, which plants a seed of abyssal energy directly into an enemy's heart. It also has some very unusual modifiers. It reveals weaknesses within the souls of...
Now, this reveal weakness mechanic is something that exists on one of the Huntress Ascendancies, but it is played around with very differently here on this particular setup. So a section of that monster's life During that period, you'll be able to steal souls from it, which is incredibly powerful. And one of the things I think is really interesting here is that your Soul Eater stacks should actually be able to stay on your character long enough for you to then get through the period where you don't have a weakness there to exploit. And then you can start getting new Soul Eater stacks again before you start losing them. Have to navigate the exact timing of this. This requires a bit of testing to be sure on, but it looks like it's something where you're going to be able to get quite a lot of stacks of Soul Eater as long as you time your attacks quite carefully there. Another thing that's kind of cool, but I don't think is as strong, is that when you're hit during the period that one of these weaknesses is exposed, so while the life bar is in the green area rather than in the red area, then you'll recoup almost all of that life. That said, I think that that is a bit unreliable, and I'd regard that as a gimmick bonus that's a welcome bonus, but it is fundamentally a gimmick. It's not something that's a major part of the power of the item.
Rare and unique enemies. If you hit that weakness, you can eat their soul. You'll also recoup 100% of damage taken from enemies with an open weakness as life.
And now we get to the new Incursion Temple currencies. These are going to require a lot of testing. I cannot say yet whether these are good, bad, or indifferent. That's going to be something that we're going to have to see over a longer period of time. But they definitely have some interesting potential.
Atziri's temple now has a new currency item that you can use to go double or nothing on an already corrupted item. Using it will remove a random explicit mod, but in exchange for that, the existing corrupted enchantments will be upgraded to a significantly more powerful tier.
So you can think of this as like a Chaos Orb for corrupted items. The mod that's removed is just a random modifier from the item, so it's kind of like hitting it with an annul. This is going to be bad. It's always going to hurt the item, but sometimes it will hurt more than other times. But on this item, the Val enchantment that was granting 39 life got boosted up to 139 life. Sometimes it's going to be a fantastic trade-off, sometimes it's not. It's really going to come down to what the mod that's removed is, how important it is to the item, and also how substantial the upgrade is to the particular item that's affected. However, this is going to have some interesting additional interactions that we'll talk about in a sec with items that are double corrupted. So when I say double corrupted, what I mean is that they have 2 Val enchantments on them.
Have an item with a low tier affix but a great corrupted implicit? Why not take a gamble? And yes, if it's been double corrupted and it's 2 enchantments.
However, one thing you're going to notice here is that this second time, this is going to end up being pretty bad because it's going to lose a very important mod with this second corruption. This is going to be the cost of using these new currency orbs. It's not going to lose that +5, but it is going to lose the explicit spell damage %, which was a very good roll. And that's going to get absolutely gutted here because that's a hybrid modifier and a normal modifier, and the normal modifier is going to get deleted. And ultimately, while you're very happy with the first annul corrupt that applied on this item, I think the second one might actually not be quite so hot.
You can upgrade them both. Just use 2 orbs. So that's 054. Expedition and the Runes of Aldur should feel much more complete in the endgame now. Leveling additional characters should be significantly more enjoyable, and there's a powerful new Vessel of Coolmark unique to discover.
I think one of the important things to say here is that this is not the end of the news that Grinding Gear Games put out today, because they clarify after this that this is the last major patch that's coming for 0.5.0 until 0.5.5, which is likely going to be after Path of Exile 1's next league. They don't actually explicitly say that, but it's my speculation at least, based on what we see here. That is then going to be accompanied by a 1-month event in Path of Exile 2. That event is going to have a fresh economy, but it will also likely have a lot of balance changes in it as well. So at that point, you'll have the option of jumping into a new character with a new set of balance changes if you want, and you'll be able to play with the more polished versions of Expedition and Runes of Aldur that are being brought about here. Alternately, you can continue playing your Runes of Aldur characters, but it's not clear from the announcements that they've made so far whether that will be in an ongoing Runes of Aldur League, or whether they'll be moved over to Early Access Standard. Grinding Gear Games haven't clarified that either way. A quick note that 055 will not be as big a patch as 050 was, and really this is about Grinding Gear Games getting ready to get 1.0.0 in the best possible state, but that is likely to be somewhere in December, at least based on my current read of the things Grinding Gear Games have been saying over the last while.
Our last major patch for a little while, for 055, which will be alongside a 1-month event with a new economy. We hope you enjoy 054, and see you in Rayclast.
And it's Editing Gog here. This is the point at which I had originally recorded an outro to the video, but I had messed up and lost it all because I had been muted because I muted while Jonathan was speaking. However, it actually ended up pretty well because I was editing this video, I was just sort of getting to the end, and I thought I better just go and check, given I made that little mistake. Has the patch gone live? The answer is yes, it's gone live. It went live about an hour ago as I'm finishing this video off. So probably about an hour and a half ago by the time you're seeing it. Now, in this, there's a couple of other little changes as well. All the main features have already been announced, but in terms of things that matter here, a couple of unique items have had their minimum levels set to 55, ones where it wasn't really clear what they were before because they're on weird bases. Also, on top of that, there's been a couple of resistances on pinnacle bosses that have been nerfed, and there've also been some damage nerfs to the Arbiter of Ash. Resistances in general on a lot of pinnacle bosses have been nerfed. This means actually that for Rakiata's flow builds, this is actually a nerf to Rakiata's flow. So I think you should keep that one in mind. Definitely remember that. You're going to feel like you're doing less damage if you're using Rakiata's flow just against those pinnacle bosses. That's because their stats were changed in a way that favors the player in general, but in your specific situation does not. Otherwise, there's also been a couple of other little changes that have taken place, but the most important one really is that there seem to have been a couple of fixes to specific technical issues people were facing, and at the same time, the California server has been having some real problems. So if you would normally play on the California server, maybe jump over to Texas, I think is reasonably close. Maybe play on that one for the moment, just until that gets under control and until people start reporting that California is good again. That's really it here. There are some other little changes, but you can have a look at the patch notes down in the description below. Those were newly out. They were done after I recorded almost all of this video. But the biggest single change there is those nerfs to pinnacle bosses, which can, in certain circumstances, make them harder. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you around. I'm going to actually be jumping over back into Path of Exile 1 for the return of the Ancestors event there, but I will definitely be messing around in Path of Exile 2 once the exciting point of the start of the POE 1 event has sort of wound up.